I wonder if you could just introduce yourselves, and then I'll ask you some questions about the project, okay? Why don't we start with you, Cheryl?
Yeah, so hi, my name is Dr. Cheryl Dong. I'm an assistant professor here at Bowling Green State University, and I do a lot of public history, so outreach to museums and historic sites, and really preparing students for a career in those fields.
Yeah. And you, sir?
Hi, I'm Amilcar Challu. I'm Associate Professor of History and Chair of the Department, and partner in crime with Cheryl. I do Latin American and environmental history, so I'm coming a little bit from that angle to this project.
Okay. Well, there's a lot of stuff going on in conjunction with the eclipse, and maybe you can just talk about your journey so far in preparing all of this and where the ideas came from that you're transmitting to the students. Go ahead, Cheryl.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna have to give credit for the idea to Amilcar. I mean, he kind of came to my office one day last year. Last year was my first year here at BGSU, and he was like, "Oh, there's this total solar eclipse happening," and that was the first I'd heard of it. And then he was like, we could do like a podcast around it. And at first I was thinking, well, that's science and what we do is history. How does this work? But then we were talking kind of a little bit more about how people make meaning around eclipses and how, sorry, my whole thing's doing a, but anyways, about how people have made meaning over eclipses and how eclipses have really shaped the course of North American history. And our thought was, well, wouldn't it be so great to highlight all of these cultures that exist in North America along the path of totality for the eclipse? So that was our initial thought. We looked into kind of funding, and we ended up applying, and we were successful getting in Ohio Humanities Grant, which greatly aided our work. And then over the summer, we had a graduate student working with us, and Dr. Challu and Becky Brown, who is our coordinator here of, what was her official title?
Outreach
Outreach
coordinator.
coordinator. Okay, that's it. Yeah, so our outreach coordinator kind of got together and put together all of this wonderful research on eclipses, and kind of the history and the different stories that people tell about eclipses from a lot of First Nations and indigenous cultures. And we really had the idea, because this is a North American eclipse, to really highlight what Indigenous Americans kind of thought about eclipses throughout. And it just worked out really well that in Ohio, of course, this is the first total solar eclipse since the eclipse of 1806, which is often referred to as Tecumseh's eclipse, and played a rather major part in the formation of a Shawnee confederacy to essentially resist American settlement in the Ohio Valley.
Dr. Challu, let's give you an opportunity to tell us a little bit about your role in all of this. I noticed that you're also giving you're one of the speakers coming up in March, yeah, about the eclipse. There's all kinds of activities, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But I wonder if you could take the mic and tell us a little bit about your participation in this project.
Yeah, no, it all started with my colleague, the chair of astronomy and physics, saying there's this happening and we're planning things, and I just want people to think about it. Maybe you can do something about it. And then, yeah, bumping into Cheryl's and Cheryl and talking about it, and it happened. My role has been, much like Cheryl. I taught the podcasting class with Cheryl. It was we call it a team taught class, right? And it was amazing because it was really a team of not only us two, but also partners in Mid-Story, Ohio Newsroom, even University of North Carolina, NPR. And so it was truly coming together with a team. I contributed some research, especially coming from the Mexico side. The Eclipse starts in Mexico, so we wanted to highlight, as Cheryl said, the whole arc of the eclipse. And so one of our interviews was particularly on a Native American community that gained recent recognition on its own in Durango, Mexico. And it was a beautiful interview, and that was to me one of the highlights of the whole project. And I also interviewed the archaeologist, lead archaeologist here in the Hopewell earthworks. So like, to me, it was like just a pleasure to bring everything together along that arc, right? And coordination a little bit. I'm more like the spreadsheet guy, so I do like the okay, how we are going to allocate resources, spend money, and things like that. So I'm also the bean counter, right?
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the podcast class. You both were co-instructors in this. Did you focus more on like interviewing people and getting students aware of how to talk to people, or did you focus on the technical aspect of it at all? I'm just curious how it works.
We did a lot of both. I mean, it was a joint graduate undergraduate class, and I will say the undergraduates did phenomenal. Of course, so did our graduate students. But we, really started out with trying to give them control of the narrative. We came in with some basic storyboards and themes. And then they were the ones who did most of the interviews. I helped a lot with the technical issues with scripting and things like that. But they came up with the outlines. They did all the interviews. They thought about strategically about which interviews to use in their episodes. They produced the scripts and then they produced the episodes. And so I had them use GarageBand to kind of refine the podcast. And so we have rough cuts of all the episodes now, and actually they sound fantastic.
Yeah.
What we're kind of doing now is having mid-story do some of the final production work on them, in terms of, adding in the music and making it sound as smooth as possible. Those were things that, unfortunately, the students weren't able to do because they had, so much to do over the class. And we also talked a lot about the theory of podcasting. How do you tell a story in an audio format and make that engaging? So yeah, I think the students really took it and they went in their own way. And I think so much of it was shaped by the interviews that we did. So I will say that Amilcar and I went in and we did not fully know exactly what they were going to produce. And that was really exciting, right? It is a teaching experience to have our students create something wholly new.
Well, and it's great that they're not only learning themselves, but they're able to propagate that to the general public, right?
Yeah.
Who
And
came up with
that's
these?
for us. That's for us. It's a I mean, a critical outcome of this class and other classes that we teach in public history is, you're doing this beyond the classroom, right? And it's interesting because in many other classes we are teaching students to write, like very polished academic papers with very good citations, and right now we had to say, okay, you need to take 2 steps back, relearn how to write and communicate, because these that we consider very good, the 15-page paper, great, but people don't want to listen to a 15-page paper. It has a value in one place, but not in another, right? And so that was a little bit too of the learning curve. It's taking those 2 steps back and rethinking the writing process, right? Yeah.
Well, let me just say, welcome to my world,
Yeah.
right? That's the kind of thing that I
Yeah.
deal with every day.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to fatigue the public's ear, when you create these podcasts.
Yeah.
Who comes up with the titles? I listened to the first podcast, Total Eclipse of the Swamp is called. I love that. It makes me think of that song, Total Eclipse of the Heart, right? Maybe you can take us through that process.
Well, I think it's one and the other. I mean, I think Dr. Dong and I have like a knack for coming with titles. So I think that one is mine. But yeah, and definitely it sounds like the song.
Yeah, we'll give you the. Tell us about that first episode. What it's about, and how you're introducing this idea of history as it relates to the eclipse.
Yeah, so I will just say first of all that the members of that team that produced that episode, our students Sam Davis, Peter Limbert, and who was the last student on that one?
Joe Disari. Yeah.
So they really took it on, and I think it's the hardest thing, to open up the podcast. And for us, we wanted that first episode to really demonstrate fully what we're trying to do to incorporate the cultural and the historical and put it all together. And we really went back and forth with that episode quite a bit. We thought at first, oh, they're going to do a very long sciencey introduction about what an eclipse was. And our first draft was that, and it just didn't work. And so we were thinking, well, how do we do it? And then I think it became a process of show, not tell, right?
Mm-hmm.
So by using the story of that 1806 eclipse and pulling out the ways in which it really inflects both Shawnee history, but also our history as a whole North American history, we can actually show that eclipses aren't just these like natural phenomena that occur, but have this real effect on how people conceive of the world and even wars and things like that. So yeah, they did a really good job. We had some phenomenal interviews in that episode, and I think it just pulled together so well.
Yeah, agreed, definitely. How many episodes are there going to be in total? I think 4 or 5. 5 episodes.
But
yeah.
but historians are terrible at counting. So there are 5 episodes and an introduction, and then 2 bonus episodes. So
so they're really more like 8. But
yeah. It's
yeah.
conceived as a series of 5. But we had a lot of content that we wanted to use, and so yeah. But we are not telling you what's the topic of the bonus episode, so that will be released over time.
We'll save something for people's experience. It's been a while since the early 1800s, and the last time that we had a total eclipse in this area. I view it as an opportunity, right? It's obviously an opportunity for you to talk to your students about this history, and also to talk to the public about this history. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about what you want to get out of this program, what is important to you, and how you think the public should use it beyond the eclipse itself that's happening in April. Dr. Challu, what do you say?
Yeah, I mean, I think the interesting thing to me about the eclipse is that it's something that it's totally out of our control. It happens, and now we can predict it, which makes it like very different experience than it was before. But being like this natural world physics, the universe, right? It touches our core as human beings, right? And I think that through the eclipse, we kind of see a reflection of who we are, individually and as a society. And I think that in this time, particularly, I don't know, I feel like the idea that this is connecting us throughout North America, connecting past and present, and across geographies. It's a powerful idea. That's where I come out. I mean, that's what it means for me. But probably for the audience, there will be other meanings that they will be making. But that's the joy of it. It's like a glass empty, right? And what it's filled depends on each one, what we come up with. I think that the eclipse is a perfect way of realizing that, right? Of reflecting who we are. So that's one key outcome, right? I would say also, as historians, we like to think critically, right, about the past. It's not just a series of events, but how it's transforming people, the way that people see themselves, the way that how everything is interconnected, right? So I mentioned that today we can predict eclipses, and today we can move, right? I'm having family coming from the state of Washington for the eclipse, right? That's new. That didn't happen 100 years ago. And even 150 years ago, they were like airing the predictions, and every newspaper report is, oh, they got it wrong by 3 hours, 4 hours. But in Europe, they could predict it like right to the minute, right? And so it was also an issue of national pride, whether you could predict it like exactly or not, right? So that's another thing that I feel that the eclipse, again, as something that it's like an empty glass, right? And what you feel it's filled with social content, social context. No?
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, in modern life, I mean, a lot of people will think of the eclipse, as just an event. They'll let it pass. It's not a big deal. But it was a much bigger deal when it last happened here in Ohio. And I assume you're trying to take this opportunity to learn more about how the eclipse affected history and how it affects us today. Dr. Dong, do you have plans for watching the eclipse? You going to be at the big BGSU party?
Yes.
Yeah.
And in fact, my public history class right now is working on a 3-panel exhibit for this to kind of coincide with the podcast. And they're doing such a fabulous job with it. We just picked the background design, and I have to say that I came up with it, so I'm like super proud of myself. That was my like little bit of graphic design, and they liked it enough. I think they're gonna tweak it a little bit because they want it to be perfect. And I told them, well, I've maxed out my skills in graphic design, so whatever else happens from here, it's up to you guys. But yeah, so they're having a lot of fun with it, and for me, it's it's also, I want the audience to realize, this is what our students can do, that they are quite professional, and we're really, pushing the boundaries of what history is here at BGSU. So a little bit selfish, I do want the public to learn about eclipses, but I also want them to kind of, ooh, look at our students, how wonderful they are.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's wonderful. So this will be on Spotify, is that right? How are you releasing the podcast? Through
we
Spotify?
we do have a website in BGSU. But, again, we're historians, so we fret about archiving and about permanence, right? So it's going to be in Spotify and likely other platforms too for wide distribution, but we also want to keep an archival copy, right? So where you could always go and find it. Of course, the archives will have a copy of it, but we also have a website in the College of Arts and Sciences where we are hosting it, and it's going to have introductions and every art. But yeah, so the idea is to make it available in many different ways. It's not just through our website. Otherwise, I mean, it would be like this tiny audience, right? We are looking to reach out.
Do we know when the next eclipse is after this? That'll be in Ohio.
Ooh, long time after. I mean, it's you got me there. I think it's more than 60 years from now. I think it's this is going to be in Ohio. I mean, a total eclipse is very infrequent. It could be even 400 years from one to the other. And so here in Ohio, I think it's 200 years from the last one, or 215, then 60 more years to the next one. That's kind of even very frequent. Another
Once in a
thing,
lifetime.
Yeah, and that's one interesting issue with the so-called Tecumseh eclipse of 1806, that in 1791 or 94. I'm bad historian, I forgot the date. There was an eclipse like 20 years before. It was partial, but still very noticeable. And so the high frequency of eclipses around that time also probably made an impact, right, in that time period.
Yeah. Well, it's so interesting, and I look forward to the other episodes of the podcast. I do want to mention that there are a lot of events aside from the podcast that are tied to the total eclipse on April 8th, I believe it is.
Yeah.
The afternoon of April 8th. You can find online a list of events at events.bgsu.edu/eclipse. That also includes some of the blurbs about the speakers that you have lined up. What are you going to talk about, Dr. Challu?
I'm talking about the eclipse history in Mexico, starting with the Mayas till the present, but it's organized by the BGSU Planetarium and the Department of Physics and Astronomy, and so they invited me to give a talk. We are also going to have colleagues from Canada and Indiana coming over on February 22nd for another one of these events. That's going to be in the Wood County District Public Library in Bowling Green. And we're going to have, like top-notch history of science, the archivist of the Royal Astronomical Society in Canada, another astronomer from Canada who would blend in Anishinaabe traditions and Western traditions of astronomy. So, and that's only, two of the events. Other speakers are going to talk about photography, Shakespeare, predicting eclipses. Yeah. No, it's a great program. Yeah,
it's a wonderful lineup. And I should mention that folks like me will be streaming it probably, so we'll watch it live streamed, and there's a link at that website that I gave.
Yeah. And there's even an easier way of getting to it. It's bgsu.edu/eclipse. So if you forget events, that also gets you there.
Good to know. Good to know. Well, we'll link to that as well as to Spotify, or we'll figure out how we can link to the podcast as well.
We can give you the link. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And I think the first episode, like we had to delay a little bit as we were trying to get our music and everything together. But we're looking at releasing the first episode now, February 21st.
Okay.
Our mid-story is working hard on kind of, putting all that together. And I do want to mention that we actually ended up having a graduate student in the music college here compose, original music for this podcast.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Well, I look forward to hearing the souped up version of the episodes that I have. Yeah. Well, I want to thank you both for joining me and talking about this. Dr. Amilcar Challu.
Yes, you got it. How did you do that?
Well, this is my living. I try to make up, people's names, and they're always too nice to tell me that I'm wrong.
No, you nailed it, actually.
You are the chair of the Department of History and associate professor, and Dr. Cheryl Dong is assistant professor of history. And I also have here that you advise interns as well. Did you have any intern input in this podcast, in this class?
Not an intern defined as such, but we have still student workers that are working. So it's the equivalent of an internship, but
yeah. Well, it's fascinating. Thank you both for joining
us. But not technically an internship, but yeah.
I understand completely. Well, thanks to both of you for talking about this exciting project. And if folks want to watch the eclipse, there are lots of opportunities to do that, including at Bowling Green State University. It's on April 8th, around 3 something in the afternoon, I believe. But Yeah,
Yes.
and this is a once in a lifetime opportunity. So I urge folks to not only listen to the podcast, watch the speakers, but also to experience the eclipse. So you can
Yeah.
say to your grandchildren, I was there then.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. Well, thank you for joining us here on WGTE.
Thank you so much. We appreciate it.